In the shadows of post-war Europe, a new chapter began, marked by chaos and fear. With cities lying in ruins and countless lives irrevocably altered, the aftermath of World War II painted a grim scene. Names of once powerful men vanished from history, hidden beneath the weight of false identities, as many Nazi officers slipped through the cracks and faded into obscurity. It was a world where the echoes of war still rang loud, and justice remained a distant hope for millions who had suffered unspeakably. Among those powerful figures was Adolf Eichmann, a man whose role in history was equally significant and notorious. As the chief architect of the Holocaust's logistics, he meticulously orchestrated the transport of millions to concentration camps, a grim task executed with cold precision. Eichmann was not merely a cog in the machine. His hands were stained with the blood of the innocent. He was a man who had contributed directly to the horrors unfolding across Europe. At the close of the Nuremberg trials, where many of his counterparts faced judgment for their actions, Eichmann managed to slip away from the web of justice that encircled others. He evaded capture, cleverly vanishing into the dark underbelly of South America, hiding from the very world that sought to bring him to account. For 15 long years, he embraced this new life, living quietly in a strange land where he could reinvent himself as an everyday man, a husband, a father, an unremarkable ghost among the living. But justice has a way of lurking in the shadows, waiting for cracks to appear in a carefully crafted facade. Then came a moment that would provoke a seismic shift in the narrative of accountability for war crimes. In Tel Aviv, a single file landed on the desk of the Mossad, Israel's national intelligence agency. The contents of that file were troubling yet thrilling, a whisper of a lead, a map marking the possible location of the man who had escaped the noose of justice. What followed was not merely an operation to catch a fugitive. It was an investigation that pored over maps, scrutinized testimonies, and sifted through the troubled memories of a generation that had witnessed the horrors of the past. Each piece of information unearthed a question as profound as the act itself. How could a man who had brought such devastation still live with the normalcy of everyday life, evading the consequences of his actions? As the stakes rose and the hunt intensified, the lines between hunter and hunted began to blur. A man who once wielded power over life and death was now a target, fraught with the complexities of human morality. The determination of those who sought justice echoed through the lives still haunted by echoes of his past. The tale of Eichmann's evasion was drawing to a close, and what was set to unfold was as riveting as it was necessary, a confrontation with history that demanded resolution. As the sun set over Buenos Aires, a warm orange glow bathed the streets, giving the bustling city an almost dreamlike quality. The air, thick with the scents of asado smoke, mingled with jumbled conversations and laughter drifting from the vibrant local cafes. But beneath this lively tapestry lay a somber past. The lingering shadows of Europe's darkest history clung to the tenements, where a medley of post-war immigrants sought refuge, some with weary hearts, others with guilty secrets. Among them were those who had fled the ruins of their homeland, desperate for a new beginning. However, some carried not just their bags, but the weight of unconfessed sins. In the 1950s, Argentina emerged as a haven for many former Nazis, with Buenos Aires being an unexpected hotspot for these individuals. They arrived on the shores of the Rio de la Plata with new names and stories crafted out of necessity. One such man, living quietly under the alias Ricardo Clement, had once wielded immense power. Adolf Eichmann, the orchestrator of the Holocaust, was hiding in plain sight, spending his days laboring at a Mercedes-Benz factory. The irony was thick, crafting finely engineered vehicles while his own past ran over countless lives like a freight train, unforgiving and unrelenting. His life seemed mundane, almost pedestrian, a stark contrast to the atrocities he had orchestrated. Each evening, he would walk home along the peaceful streets, nodding to neighbors, his secrets hidden behind a composed smile. Others might see a middle-aged man, nothing more than a factory worker returning to his simple North Buenos Aires apartment. But in the eyes of the world that believed Eichmann was dead, history was closing in, inch by tense inch. As news of his possible existence began to permeate the ranks of the Israeli intelligence agency, Mossad faced a moral quagmire. They had to confront not only the potential truth of Eichmann's presence, but also the ethical implications of hunting a man who had seemingly slipped through the cracks of time. Initial reports were unclear. Doubt loomed heavy in the air like the humid Buenos Aires nights. In their search for confirmation, agents wrestled with their mission, each grappling with the weight of the past and with a burning question: should they pursue him or let his sins remain cloaked in time? The streets were quiet, but tension buzzed just beneath the surface. Mossad operatives moved through the shadows, piecing together fragments of a life that could unravel decades of grief and suffering. With every new clue, they drew closer to confronting a ghost that had thrived on anonymity, hidden among the echoes of a city painted by quiet streets and a history too haunting to shake off. In a country teeming with unspoken narratives, the question loomed larger each day. What was justice for the countless lives stolen, and how far would they go to ensure that it would finally be served? In the heart of Argentina, a seemingly ordinary family was navigating the complexities of life after war, but beneath the surface of their everyday existence lay a chilling truth waiting to be uncovered. Lothar Hermann, a German Jewish survivor, often reflected on his past. Having faced unimaginable horrors during the Holocaust, he hoped to find solace in the new world he had embraced. Yet the scars of history were never too far away. As a father, Lothar was protective, not just of his own heart, but of his daughter's as well. He wanted to shield her from the shadows that lingered long after the war had ended. His daughter soon brought home a young man who, on the surface, seemed charming and confident. But as the relationship blossomed, Lothar couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling that crept under his skin. The young man frequently bragged about his father, an impressive, albeit chilling, boast regarding his familial ties to a high-ranking Nazi. In Lothar's gut, something didn't sit right. Given his history, the weight of those words felt immense, heavy with echoes of horror. Summoning his courage, Lothar relied on his instinct. He couldn't simply dismiss this young man's claims. After all, the Nazi regime was brutal and unforgiving, and their influence had shattered countless lives like his own. Deciding to act, he penned a letter to the Israeli authorities, detailing his suspicions. It was a measured act of defiance against a past that seemed determined to invade the present. In that letter, Lothar expressed not only his suspicions, but his hopes that the truth might lead to justice, hopes that the haunting spectre of his past might finally be addressed. Months passed, fraught with suspense and uncertainty, as Lothar awaited a response. The bureaucratic wheels turned slowly, but unbeknownst to him, something momentous was unfolding on the other side of the world. The Israeli intelligence agency, Mossad, received his letter and began to dig deeper. They meticulously sifted through wartime photographs, cross-referencing records and assembling pieces of a puzzle that had long been concealed. Then came the breakthrough. One fateful day, Eichmann's name surfaced, linked unmistakably to the young man who had bragged about his father. The monster who had orchestrated the horrors of the Holocaust, responsible for the anguish of millions, was alive, hiding in plain sight and going by a different name. The layers of grief and disbelief consolidated within Lothar as he realized the extent of what his own intuition had uncovered. In this moment, we witness how a simple act of suspicion, a father's protective instinct, grew into a pivotal piece of history. Lothar Hermann, guided by his lived experience and unyielding spirit, had unwittingly initiated a process that would bring one of history's most notorious villains to justice. His story emphasizes the power one individual holds in confronting injustice, the courage to question and the relentless pursuit of truth, reminding us all that sometimes the smallest actions can lead to monumental change. Mossad didn't enter Argentina with guns blazing. Instead, they approached their mission with a quiet intensity, quietly weighing every move. The stakes were high. They were facing one of the most notorious war criminals of all time, Adolf Eichmann, who had orchestrated the logistics of the Holocaust. But why did they decide to act alone, bypassing international legal channels? Argentina, having harbored a considerable number of war criminals after World War II, was unwilling to extradite Nazists back to the newly formed state of Israel, leaving Mossad with little choice. Diplomatic negotiations met brick walls, and time was running out. Hitler's henchmen were aging, and it was imperative to act swiftly. The urgency was palpable. Eichmann, often referred to as the architect of the Holocaust, couldn't be allowed the luxury of time, and so they launched Operation Finale, a carefully crafted mission that would require the utmost precision and planning. The atmosphere in the secretive halls of the Mossad was thick with anticipation as agents began gathering resources. For weeks, they meticulously created a suite of forged documents, passports, visas, identification papers, laying the ground for their operatives to blend seamlessly into the Argentine landscape. Safe houses were secured across Buenos Aires, on the back streets of the city where unsuspecting locals roamed, gleefully unaware of the gravity of those living among them. The agents, some posing as diplomats, others as engineers or mere tourists, would become part of the city's rhythm. Every aspect of their cover story was scrutinized, every detail drilled down upon to ensure full authenticity. As they took their positions on the ground, Eichmann's daily routine became their focal point. They studied the man who had sent millions to their untimely ends. Tailors by day, they turned into the keenest hunters by night. The Mossad operatives trailed Eichmann, taking notes on his interactions, his favorite haunts, observing how he moved through the world, his mundane life in the bustling city of Buenos Aires juxtaposed against the horrors of his past. Every movement was logged and every pattern meticulously analyzed. During this phase, the tension in the air became almost tangible. Unmasking Eichmann was paramount, yet they had to ensure that they confirmed his identity beyond doubt before moving in. Reports were compiled, photographs exchanged over clandestine meetings, and every piece of evidence pieced together like a complex puzzle waited for that final piece to complete the picture and validate their mission. The pressure escalated. With each passing day, the risk of exposure heightened, but the Mossad operatives pressed on. They understood the world was watching from the shadows of history, waiting for justice to be served. Yet at the same time, they were deeply aware that they were operating outside the law, which kept them all on edge. But each scout and informant they met reaffirmed their commitment. Eichmann was living his life effortlessly, all while his past continued to haunt countless families. The gravity of their undertaking weighed heavily on them, and it was a reminder that the true act of bravery wasn't just about taking down a monster. It was about restoring the dignity to a people who had been silenced far too long. As they prepared to take action, determination hardened within them. In their minds, this was more than just an operation. It was the final page of a dark chapter in humanity's history that needed to be rewritten. As Mossad agents set their sights on bringing Adolf Eichmann to justice, the daunting task of tracking his movements began. Each day, they meticulously mapped out Eichmann's routines, dissecting details as precise as his bus routes, work hours, and the exact location of his home in the suburb of San Fernando. Their target was a man who had orchestrated the logistics of the Holocaust, and they needed to ensure he would never slip through their fingers. So every morning, as Eichmann boarded the same bus, the agents would sit in nondescript vehicles, their eyes locked on him, the very embodiment of evil in their midst. It was an astonishingly ordinary scene, watching this seemingly mundane man commute to work, a daily journey that would carry so much weight in the greater narrative of justice. Their surveillance tactics grew increasingly sophisticated over those weeks. They covertly confirmed his schedule, figuring out when he would leave for work and when he would return in the evenings. This was not just a job, it was personal. Each agent felt the weight of their mission, knowing that every second counted in their quest to capture a war criminal. Every night, they would gather by borrowed cars, hidden under the cover of darkness and adorned with a facade of normality. The streets were empty, illuminated only by fading streetlights that flickered like cautionary beacons. Together, they rehearsed their operation, each detail meticulously plotted out. How they'd ambush him, how to contain him without escalating to violence and alarming neighbors or the nearby police. The plan was straightforward in theory, yet extremely delicate in practice. Capturing Eichmann alive was their challenge and their obligation. In their minds, they calculated every possible outcome, assessing what could go wrong while fortified by their collective hope. They had but one chance to execute their plan and bring him into custody, and it had to be timed to perfection. As they positioned themselves within earshot of his home, tensions ran high. The agents exchanged silent glances, each heartbeat echoing in the stillness of the night. They knew Eichmann's challenge, his ability to blend into the routine of civilian life, was their biggest obstacle. The goal was not just physical capture, but psychological as well. They must ensure no unnecessary commotion would alarm the sleepy suburb. The agents spoke in hushed tones, running through the plan once more, assuring one another that they had rehearsed this scenario countless times. They positioned themselves along the route Eichmann would take from the bus stop to his home. Patience was crucial. They would wait until he was at his most vulnerable, just moments away from the safety of his front door. The sting of anticipation hung in the air, heavy with the knowledge that soon enough justice would take tangible form. Every second felt like a lifetime, but they remained resolute, hearts pounding in a carefully orchestrated symphony of hope, fear, and determination. That night, under the cloak of darkness, they were not just agents of Mossad, they were avengers carrying the memories of lost lives, ready to metamorphose decades of anguish into a fleeting moment of reckoning. As the clock struck 10 p.m. on May 11, 1960, the streets of Buenos Aires were shrouded in a velvety darkness, the kind that made the slightest sounds echo ominously. The soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze mingled with the distant hum of the city, hiding the tension that hung in the air like a charged storm waiting to break. For Adolf Eichmann, the orchestrator of unimaginable horrors, this was just another night, or so he believed. Eichmann stepped off the bus, nonchalantly adjusting his collar, the remnants of his former life cloaked in the mundane. He walked along Garibaldi Street, that familiar path leading him home, unsuspecting of the storm that was about to engulf him. The glow of the street lamp flickered overhead, spotlighting a man oblivious to the hunters that had been watching him for months. Suddenly, the low rumble of a car engine pierced through the quiet night. Headlights exploded onto the scene, illuminating Eichmann's silhouette in a blinding wash of white. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end as he turned, recognition flickering in his eyes. Before he could react, agents surged from the shadows, their movements swift and practiced, honed to a razor's edge. Adrenaline surged through Eichmann's body as he instinctively fought back, summoning all the desperation born from years of evasion. He wrestled, but it quickly became apparent that he was no match for the well-coordinated team trained by Mossad. In a heartbeat, he was overpowered, his protests swallowed by the night as they shoved him into the van's cramped floorboard. Darkness closed in, the familiar setting of Buenos Aires suddenly transformed into a cage. As the tires screeched and the van roared into the night, the world he knew faded behind them, replaced by a cacophony of anxious heartbeats and the thrum of the engine, a sound that marked the beginning of his reckoning. Inside the van, Eichmann's mind raced. No longer the puppeteer, tonight he was the puppet and perhaps the hunted. Minutes felt eternal as they drove deeper into the labyrinthine network of Buenos Aires alleys, every turn pulling him further from certainty and closer to fate. After what seemed like an eternity, the van pulled up to a discreet safe house, An unassuming facade belied the intensity of the moment unfolding within. Agents ghosted around him, their movements rehearsed, purposeful, no trace of hesitation. Inside, the atmosphere was electric, charged with the urgency of their mission. Mossad agents approached him with a meticulousness. They confirmed his identity, inspecting scars that marked his skin like cruel memories he could never escape. They spoke in hushed tones, the weight of history hanging on their words. Details of his family life, intimate and invasive, were weaponized against him, leaving no room for doubt. In that moment, as he processed the reality of his capture, the enormity of the operation ahead loomed heavy on everyone's shoulders. The risk of extraction from a foreign land, the vigilant eyes of the Argentinian authorities, and the sheer audacity of the mission made it clear the most dangerous phase was just beginning. Eichmann was not just a man, but a symbol, a representation of darkness that needed to be pulled from the depths of anonymity into the light of justice. Together, the agents steeled themselves, ready to chart a course through the stormy seas ahead. Escape wasn't just a matter of logistics, it was a race against time, a bitter contest between those who would see justice served and those who guarded secrets buried deep within the shadows of history. The stakes had never been higher, and the night was far from over. For 9 tense days, the quiet facade of a rented house in Buenos Aires became the unexpected backdrop for a high-stakes psychological chess game. Inside these walls, Adolf Eichmann, the notorious architect of the Holocaust, appeared deceptively calm. His demeanor remained collected, a stark contrast to the chaos and urgency swirling just beyond the front door. For Mossad agents tasked with his capture, maintaining his composure was crucial. They engaged Eichmann in conversation, carefully balancing respect with the tension of his impending extraction, all while documenting every nuance of his behavior. Their objective was both simple and complex: keep him at ease, prevent suspicion, and extract crucial intelligence about the mindset of a man who had once wielded tremendous power. Beneath the surface of this seemingly tranquil environment lay a pulsing undercurrent of anxiety. The Mossad operatives displayed remarkable discipline, each moment meticulously orchestrated. They understood that Eichmann's mental state could shift in an instant, potentially unraveling their meticulously crafted plan. For them, every engaging dialogue was a delicate dance, acknowledging his past without igniting panic. They'd chosen to treat him with a level of respect that seemed almost surreal given his history. Yet lurking in the shadows of this operation was a palpable fear, the potential for detection by Argentine authorities. This wasn't just an abduction, it was a diplomatic minefield. If the Argentine government caught wind of their operation, it could spark a crisis, potentially igniting a diplomatic firestorm that would hinder future relations not just with Argentina, but with other nations too. Mossad's reputation and operational methods hinged on stealth, and failure was simply not an option. Recognizing the gravity of their situation, agents worked behind the scenes to coordinate with El Al, Israel's national airline, to curate an exit strategy so seamless it felt almost routine. They fabricated a cover story designed to provide an alibi for both the agents and Eichmann himself. If all went according to plan, he would be whisked away, as if on a routine journey rather than an audacious escape from justice. As the days wore on, both Eichmann and his captors awaited a resolution to this precarious balancing act. For Eichmann, the spectre of exposure loomed closer with each passing hour. For Mossad, every tick of the clock intensified the stakes of their unprecedented mission. This was a race against time, where meticulous planning collided with unpredictable human psychology. An imminent rupture was always just one discovery away, and with it, the fragile peace they had forged could collapse into chaos. As the sun began to rise on May 20th, 1960, the atmosphere in the safe house where Adolf Eichmann was being held was tense but charged with purpose. Mossad agents moved with a precision only born from thorough planning and unwavering determination. They had spent weeks orchestrating an operation that would yet again shift the weight of history, the moment they would finally smuggle one of the architects of the Holocaust out of Argentina and into the arms of Israeli justice. In a meticulously planned operation, Eichmann's escape relied heavily on the art of deception. He was to be disguised as a gravely injured crew member on an El Al flight. The disguise was more than just a costume, it was a meticulously crafted portrayal of vulnerability. The agents covered Eichmann's identity with fake paperwork that highlighted his injuries and ensured that he had the appearance of needing assistance. Every detail was scrutinized: the crumpled airline uniform, the bandages that shaded his face, and the accompanying medical supplies that completed the ruse. With the flight set to depart shortly after dawn, timing was everything. Coordinating with Israeli officials back home was crucial. There were diplomatic sensitivities at play. To further provide cover for the operation, it was the same day Israel would celebrate its Independence Day, an occasion filled with festivities, distractions, and heightened national spirit. In the back of everyone's minds lingered the uncertainty of whether it would all work out, but in that moment there was no room for doubt. As the team approached the airport, they held their breaths, every pulse in their bodies echoing the weight of what was about to unfold. They arrived at the bustling airport, an ocean of travelers' excitement and commotion. The laughter and shouts of families celebrating the holiday masked their movements. Sensing the energy around them, it almost felt like a juxtaposition to the gravity of their mission. It was a day of liberation for many, and inadvertently a chance for justice for the millions who could not celebrate. Once aboard the El Al flight, a wave of relief washed over the agents. Eichmann was finally secured and on his way to face the consequences of his actions. There would be no turning back now. As they ascended into the sky, the horizon stretching out beneath them, a quiet victory filled the cabin. The agents exchanged knowing glances. It was more than just a successful operation. It was a moral pursuit, a chance to give a voice to those who had been silenced. And as the flight took off into the vast blue, a staggering realization sank in. Eichmann was not just a fugitive now, he was a man being escorted to justice. The mission had succeeded against the odds, and with every moment they spent in the air, each agent quietly campaigned for justice, a justice that had been denied for far too long. As news of Adolf Eichmann's capture spread like wildfire, it ignited a firestorm of reactions across the globe. Israel's announcement reverberated through the corridors of power and into the everyday lives of citizens everywhere. In the United States and Western Europe, headlines blared with a mix of astonishment and relief. Many felt that justice was finally within reach for the millions who suffered during the Holocaust. However, the response was far less enthusiastic in Argentina, where Eichmann had been living in a quiet suburb of Buenos Aires. The Argentine government officially protested the abduction, viewing it as a violation of their sovereignty. They were concerned about the diplomatic implications and the potential backlash from the international community. Yet, despite some localized discontent, most of the world stood firmly behind Israel's bold move. As the trial commenced in 1961, it was hard to overstate its significance. For the first time, millions could witness the raw account of Holocaust survivors taking the stand, recounting the unimaginable horrors they had faced. These testimonies were heart-wrenching. Survivors stood in front of the cameras, their voices unsteady but resolute, as they shared the traumatic memories of loss, despair, and survival. It was a pivotal moment, allowing the world to sit in a courtroom as history was laid bare. And then there was Eichmann himself. With a calm demeanor that shocked viewers, he attempted to present himself as a mere cog in the machinery of the Nazi regime. His chilling defense, slipping into the famous refrain, "I was just following orders," echoed throughout the courtroom and sent shivers down spines across continents. The banality of evil, as Hannah Arendt famously posited, was illustrated in stark contrast to the personal stories of atrocity that filled the airwaves. It was as if the world had pulled back the curtain on history and was witnessing the face of evil attempt to justify his actions as if they were administrative duties. The trial unfolded on television screens, becoming one of the most watched broadcasts of its time. Families across the globe gathered around their sets, transfixed not just by the proceedings, but by the weight of the implications for humanity's collective conscience. It transformed the understanding of the Holocaust. People began to grasp the magnitude of the devastation, prompting conversations about complicity, accountability, and remembrance. In a way, Eichmann's trial was not just about him. It became a larger reflection on society, on what happens when a nation turns a blind eye to atrocities. The emotional testimony and stark rationalizations forced viewers to confront uncomfortable truths about morality and justice. Suddenly, it was impossible to ignore the ramifications of indifference, both in the past and present. Through this remarkable trial, a global dialogue was sparked, urging people everywhere to remember and learn, ensuring that the lessons of the Holocaust would forever resonate in the heart and mind of society. After years of meticulous planning and an unwavering dedication to justice, the curtain finally closed on one of history's most notorious figures. Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust, would stand trial in 1961 under the scrutiny of not just a courtroom, but the world. In a landmark moment for Israel, the very essence of justice was being redefined, as a nation that had only recently emerged from the depths of tragedy now sought to confront its darkest past. Eichmann's trial was more than a mere legal proceeding. It was a powerful statement against the atrocities he had orchestrated. Through this process, the voices of Holocaust survivors rang out, their harrowing testimonies weaving a narrative of loss and resilience, echoing through the chambers of justice. It was a chance for Israel to assert its humanity and to remind the world that the horrors of the Holocaust could not be forgotten, nor could they be left unpunished. This was a rare opportunity for accountability. In a stunning verdict delivered in December 1961, Eichmann was found guilty on multiple counts of crimes against humanity. His conviction sent a ripple of relief through a fractured society, symbolizing the moral imperative to hold individuals accountable for their actions, no matter how powerful. The solemnity of that moment is hard to grasp fully today, but within it lay a profound commitment to justice, the very tenets that Mossad had stood for throughout this operation. Mossad's pursuit of Eichmann was driven not by a desire for vengeance, but by a resolute sense of justice. Their operatives, coldly professional in their approach, understood that capturing Eichmann was only half of their mission. It was essential to bring him to a courtroom, to continue the dialogue of accountability in a place where the world could witness, a chance for collective healing and a reminder that evil would not go unchallenged. In June of 1962, Eichmann faced his ultimate fate, execution by hanging. This marked a significant moment in Israeli history, for it was the only time the country has ever enacted a death sentence. His demise was not celebrated as a victory, but solemnly observed, reflecting the deep complexities of justice as the new nation grappled with its moral responsibilities. In the quiet aftermath of Eichmann's sentencing, it was clear that Mossad's mission had been about more than just bringing one man to justice. It symbolized a commitment to bear witness to history, to confront the past while looking toward a future built on the foundations of accountability, dignity, and human rights. Eichmann may have hidden for 15 years, but Mossad never ceased their tireless search. When they finally located him, they didn't kill him in the dark. They brought him to the light of judgment. As we fade out over the haunting beauty of Buenos Aires streets at night, let us remember that underneath the shadows of history, the light of justice still flickers brightly.